So we have talked a lot about camera tracking in this course, which is basically telling Blender or whatever software you're using to follow the camera and approximate and recreate where you think the camera would be in 3D space. But what if we don't want to follow the camera? What if we want to follow a specific object in the scene? What if we want to track a train or a car or something moving in the scene? We don't use camera tracking for that. We use something called object tracking. Now, object tracking and camera tracking are both terms under motion tracking. Like the parent term is called motion tracking. Now, there are a lot of ways to achieve this result, to attach CG objects to objects in the real footage. But what I'm about to show you is one of the quickest and the fastest way to do object tracking in Blender. There are a lot of ways to do this. There are a lot of prep that you might need to do if you are doing it in like a major production Hollywood setting. You see that a lot of time they have some actual markers on the actor's face or on the actual object or some green object that they want to replace, or they have some colorful balls. We don't need to do that here. With this system, Blender basically does most of the work for you. The same way we do some kind of semi-auto tracking when we are doing camera tracking in Blender. It's the same technology, it's the same software, kind of the same algorithm that Blender is using to approximate where the object is in the scene and trying to augment it or add CG objects to it. So let's get to it. So we have a default Blender scene here. Let's go to the motion tracking tab, VFX motion tracking. In this tab, we could do camera tracking, I could do object tracking. So this is the clip we'll be working with. This is the background video, just a simple video of a bus and some people on the bus. So the concept that came to my mind with this video is to have something on top of the bus. So we don't want to track the actual camera as the camera is moving through the scene. We want to follow just the bus. So we can add something like a plane in front of the bus and put a product on it. Or like in the example that I did, add some cameras and attach it to the sides and the front of the bus. So a lot of things we could do. We could add glasses to the bus. But yeah, this is the process you're going to use to achieve such results. Firstly, let's drop the footage into Blender. We already have it here. As usual, click Set Scene Frames. So Blender automatically sets the amount of frames. And then click Prefetch. So you could basically take the entire clip into your memory so it's easy to play back. Now that we are done prefetching, you know, when we are doing camera tracking, the next thing we need to do is to detect features and then track the entire scene. Now we want to detect features, but we don't want to detect features on the entire scene. We want to tell Blender the objects to follow while it's tracking. So we want to choose a keyframe that is somewhere in between. So we don't want it to be in the beginning and we don't want it to be at the end. In the beginning, you can see the bus is really close to us. At the end is really far from us. We want it to be somewhere around here. So Blender can track it forward and it can also track it backwards, because to be harder for the software to track it from the beginning and figure out how it moves up until the end. It's just good practice. So let's bring it to say frame 200 and let's hit D on our keyboard and then just draw around your bus. So you would see a pen tool pop up. So you are drawing an annotation around the bus so Blender can know what objects to follow and what objects to track. Obviously, this doesn't need to be super accurate. I think this is good. Now at this exact frame 200, let's hit Detect Features. And when we click on this down here, we would see that the placement is set to whole frame, so it's tracking everything in the entire scene. Let's click on this and change it to inside annotated area, so it's only searching within this drawing that we just made. So let's adjust the settings. We could reduce the distance so we'd have more keyframes in between each other, and we could reduce the threshold. We could increase it to make it fewer, reduce it to make it more. You just want to make sure we have enough all around. Make sure you hold shift while you're dragging down so it doesn't drag too fast. Yeah, I think this is quite all right. Let's mess with the distance a little bit. Yeah, so we have a bunch of markers inside our bus. So next thing, let's click Track Forward. So it basically tracks those markers to the end. Let's go back to 200 and track backwards. So Blender took its time to find out the motion of this bus going all the way back and the motion of this bus from the middle going all the way front. So if we had started at the beginning, it would have been a lot of work to try to figure out where the bus moves from here all the way to the end, especially if a lot of change has happened between the beginning and the end. So it's best to just do it from the middle. So I think this is cool. You can see a lot of tracking markers, our position on top of the bus. You can see some of them are just acting crazy. Like this one that is acting crazy, we can just select just this and delete it. We don't want crazy markers happening here. Now that we have this, let's go to our solve tab. Then let's pick keyframes. We are going to use this keyframe A and B to pick keyframes that have the most perspective change, the most parallax, where the perspective of the object we are trying to track has moved, has changed. So you can see at the beginning of this shot, the bus was just right in front of us, and at the end somewhere here, the road bent, so it was no longer a straight road, it was now a curved road, and then we could see like slightly different angle. So I think the most perspective change happened between 200 and 280. So yeah, so let's put in those frames here. So Blender knows to search between 200 and 280 for the most perspective change. So now that we've done that, let's click on refine focal length and refine optical center. So you're using this information like you're telling Blender to approximate what it thinks the focal length of the camera, the lens that was used is, and also the optical center. So it's going to take more time to calculate and approximate the motion of these tracking markers. So let's just hit solve camera at this point. Now we have a 34 pixel solve error. What we are aiming for is something less than 1. You know, when we are camera tracking, we are aiming for something less than 0.5. Now we are aiming for something less than 1 for motion tracking. We can come here to filter tracks and then mess with this value, the track threshold. So we select just a few of them. Yeah, just about 5 of them or 6 of them, then X to delete. And then let's solve the camera motion again. Now we have a 2.73. Yeah, this is the new reprojection error. Now we could do it again till we get a value that is less than 1. So filter tracks, let's move it downwards. So we have a few of them selected. I think this 5 is good. X to delete. Now let's solve camera motion again. I have a 2.99. Let's repeat that. Filter tracks, bring it down even further. Delete, solve camera motion. Now we have a 3. Let's do it one more time. Select a few of them. X delete, solve camera motion. 0.93. Yeah, I think a 0.93 is alright. So far it's less than 1, you're good. So now that we have this, let's select one of these markers, anyone that's closest to the center, like say this one, and click set origin. So we know where the origin is. And let's now go to our layout tab. Let's come out of the camera view, move this away. Now I want to be able to see our track markers in the 3D view. If we come here to this drop down and we click on motion tracking, you should be able to see our motion tracking markers here, but we can't see it. So we need to click on the camera, then come to object constraint, then click on camera solver, add a camera solver constraint. Because if we play now, you can see our camera is not even moving. So we need to add this camera solver constraint so we can see the motion of the objects relative to the camera. We can also see our track markers in the scene. Yeah, I think this is looking good. We don't want any jittery motion, any weird shakes. That would mean something is wrong. You just want it to be a smooth motion throughout, just like the actual motion of the bus. So now we need to see our background image here. So make sure the camera is selected, come down to camera, click on background images, check this, add image, movie clip, open, and find your video. Now, if we go in the camera view, we'll be able to see our video. Let's increase the opacity to 1 so we can see it very clearly. Now we can play to make sure that these markers look like they're tracked. We don't want any situation where these markers are shaking. That would be bad. I think this is good. Yeah. So what we can do now is to align these markers to the orientation of our scene. You can see our camera is bending weirdly, and this is not how the camera was. When the camera was shooting the bus, it was not bending downwards like this. So let's come here to the pivot point and change it from median point to 3D cursor. So we are rotating around the origin. Go to the top view using 7. Then let's just rotate to try to align these markers. Go to the front view. Let's see the side view. Take this cube out of the way, make the cube invisible. Yeah, so let's rotate the camera until these markers are basically straight. and align it with our scene. In the top view, let's just rotate it this way. So you just want them to line up straight with the scene. Yeah. So this is more accurate. And in the front view, let's rotate it this way. Yeah, so this is a lot more accurate. Yeah. Now to test if our object tracking was done well, let's add geometry. Okay, we don't need to add geometry. We already have our cube here. Let's just take this cube and try to align it with these markers. Let's change this back to median point and then move the cube here, scale it down till it's as small as the markers, then bring it right in front of the markers. Just make sure the cube is right in the middle of the markers. Let's scale it on the x-axis. Yeah. So this cube is basically now going to be exactly where the markers are. So these markers are basically the same markers that we had in the motion tracking tab. All these markers that was added, this, that is what is represented here in the 3D scene. So technically this should mean in 3D space, this cube is attached to the boss. Since in our motion tracking tab, when we're scrolling back and forth, we're seeing that the markers were attached to the boss. Now, when we are going back and forth, this cube should be attached to the markers. So let's go into our camera view and let's scale this down a bit. Bring it here a bit. Now let's hit play. If we did a good job, our cube should follow the boss precisely. Yeah, you can see the cube is big in the beginning while the boss was right in front of us. And when we started bending and moving down the road and becoming far from the boss, the cube also became smaller. When the camera moved down, the cube moved appropriately. So everything is tracked to the scene. I think we have a solid motion track now. Now, when we have this, we could basically do whatever we want. We could build whatever we want around the boss. We could replace the boss entirely and put another car there, whatever we want to do. So let's do something similar to what I did in the sample footage where I had like a product or something attached to the boss. So since we have this and we know that this is where our boss is, especially because of these markers, we know that these markers show us exactly on top of the boss where the boss is. Let's start building our scene around it. So in the top view, let's click on one of the markers, whichever one is closest to the front. Yeah, then take our cube there. Let's just confirm, click on this marker. Let's make sure this marker is attached to the front. Yeah. Cool. Then have our cube just lay right on top of it. So yeah, let's just bring this down. So it's this side that is aligning with the marker. So the front of this cube is also the front of the boss. Yeah. So what we want to do is to just roughly match this cube to the mesh of the boss. So let's bring this on this axis. Let's scale it on the x-axis. Let's scale it a bit on the z-axis. And let's go into edit mode, Ctrl R, and add a few loop cuts, like 4 of them. And then let's just try to align these vertices with the boss. So let's bring this over here and just try to line it up. So here, this will serve as a shadow catcher. This is not really the actual geometry we'll be using, but this is like a shadow catcher that will serve as a 3D representation of the boss. Okay, this one, let's keep this here. Bring this one around here. Bring this one around here. Here. Yeah, I think it's already well positioned. Now we have something that is serving as the front of the boss. Let's scale this on the x-axis a bit. SX. Yeah, so we could drop whatever we want on top of this cube and it's basically representing the front of the boss. But before we do all of that, let's try to fix our lighting and our materials. So let's go to the world setting, go to color, environment texture, and find a texture that fits this scene. You can see from the shadows here, they are very soft shadows. So this is an overcast day. You can see from the sky, there are no bright blue skies. It's very gloomy. So yeah, let's find an HDRI that also has that same lighting. Open. The one I used was this shadow plats. Yeah, you can also find this on HDRI Haven. The one I used was this shadow plats. I would add it to the resources folder. Let's just open this. Now let's go to our rendered view. Come here, change this to cycles, and then come down to film, turn on transparent. Yeah, so we could match this properly. Let's try something first of all. Let's add a new material to this cube. So add a new material, and let's try to match it with the bus in the background. So let's make this red, or we could just pick the red color here. Give it more saturation, a little bit brighter, increase the metallic a bit, reduce the roughness. Yeah, so it kind of matches this. So this is one way to go. I didn't want to touch on this topic till the next lesson where we are talking about recreating your entire scene in 3D. But this is a trick you can use instead of trying to get the exact material and matching it exactly. There is a way to project your actual footage onto this cube so you can have exactly the correct color bounces and color reflections because you are projecting the exact clip on top of the geometry. So to do that, go to shading. Now this is what we have now. It is a metallic object, but then it doesn't exactly match the scene because we don't just have metallic here. We have these blacks, we have the light, we have all of this. So what we can do is to add an image texture. So Shift A, image texture, connect the color to base color, then click on open and go find the video. So you find the background video and open it here. And now let's set the frames to 389. Right, that is the frame of the entire video. Let me just cross check that. 389, yeah. So let's go back to shading tab, and now you can see the video in the background. Let's click on auto refresh and cyclic. Yeah, you could see the video in the background, but it's the wrong part of the video. We are seeing it is very weirdly projected. So to get what we are looking for, which is to see our boss on top of this material, let's click on this image texture, hit Ctrl T, make sure your node wrangler add-on is enabled so this can work. Ctrl T to add your mapping node and your texture coordinates. Now we want to change this from UV to window. So instead of using the UV of the material, we are changing it to window. So let's drag it from window to vector. So it looks like you are looking through the background image of the camera. Now we have the texture of the exact boss as the material of our cube. So in every other angle, it will not look right. From the camera perspective, it should look accurate. Why is it staying still? Oh, I thought I turned on auto refresh. Click auto refresh and cyclic, yeah. And now it is exactly how it should be. At every frame, let's go back to the layout tab. At every frame, this cube is having the correct material. So if I put something in front here, like a sphere, it should catch the exact color reflection of this this boss here. But let's make sure it matches. We could see it doesn't match exactly. I think this is probably not as reflective. Let's scale this down on the x-axis a bit and just make sure it matches in terms of color. Yeah, I think it's actually cool. And now this box that has the same exact texture as the video in the background is now tracked to the front of the box, so you can put whatever you want on top of this cube. Next thing we need to do is to make this cube a shadow catcher. So come to object, visibility, and make it a shadow catcher. So at this point we don't even see the cube at all, or whatever I put on top of this cube is going to stick there. So let's go find a 3D model to use. If you go to Polyhaven and come to assets, instead of choosing HDRIs, choose models. They have a bunch of 3D models, and these models are super quality, super detailed. I think they are photo scanned or something. Look at these goblets. Look at how accurate they look, how really good they look. So they have a bunch of models here. If you're looking for easily accessible models, this is where I found the CCTV. Yeah, here it is. The CCTV I used for my video. So you could put whatever object. Let's try downloading this clock, this alarm clock, for example. Or you could put an actual product, whatever product you're working with. You could put it on top of, okay, you can't put it on top of the bus because there are people on top of the bus. But if it was a car that doesn't have anyone on top of it, you could put the product on top of it. For this one, we want to put the product in front of the car. So let's first try with this alarm clock. Yeah, let's download a 2K res. You're downloading a blend file from Polyhaven. so it contains the textures and the blend file. So let's unzip the zip file, and you should find alarm clock.blend and the textures here. So let's just open the blend file and make sure that everything is all right. Everything is textured properly and we don't need to make any changes. Another cool thing about the models got from this website is a lot of them are already well rigged, so you don't need to think too much. They are already rigged. Okay, we are currently in pose mode. Let's change this to object mode. So let's go to the material view and make sure that the texturing is done properly. Let's just wait for it to load in the textures because I think it's currently loading it in. Yeah. Okay, so let's just copy everything here and come to our project and paste it. Yeah, we could delete this extra stuff that was added. Just delete this. Let's delete these big ones. Even this. Yeah, and this one. Let's also delete this and this. Let's go into the material view so we could see what we're working with. What is this object right here? Let's just delete it. Yeah, now we could use these empties to move the object around, I believe. Yeah, and let's bring this clock right in front of this right here. Just bring it here, bring it here, bring it down. Yeah, now let's go into this view. You would see that our clock is now very much attached to the front of this bus. Yeah, so we could add animations to the clock. We could do whatever with this. We could have whatever product we want to be attached onto this. There are a lot of applications of this. Basically, the way to think about it is you use camera tracking when you want to put your own CG object on the scene that is not moving. So the walls, the buildings, the floors, whatnot. And use object tracking when you want to put your CG objects on objects in real life that was moving. So like trams, trains, cyclists, people. This is what you use object tracking for. So yeah, too bad we can't preview this exactly how we want. Let's go into the material view and preview it here. Yeah, you can see we are perfectly attached to the bus throughout the entire video. Now let's make sure the lighting is correct. Let's go into the rendered view. This is way too bright, way too bright. So let's go to our world settings. Let's change this to 0 to see what it looks like. Now this is way too dark. Thankfully we changed it to 0 so we could see that there's still some light in this scene. Let's make sure we delete this light object. We don't need it. There's a light in this scene. You can see it up here. I didn't even know it was there. Yeah, now we could work backwards. Now let's increase this to something like 0.5 to see what that looks like. You're trying to get something that matches the background. Also, something we can do is to change our color space. Let's go to render, color management, view transform. We could change this from AGS to standard. Standard would give us a realistic view of the background video itself, not of the CG object, but the background video. You can see the difference. It is more vibrant. The lights are a lot sharper. Yeah, so this is what we would need to compare. So I think at this point, it's still too bright. It's still too bright. Let's try 8.3. Yeah, I think this is more accurate. Let's try 0.1. It's not bright enough. 0.2. Let's keep it at a 0.3. Now to get a shadows, this is what I did. Usually, to get a shadow using camera tracking, you have to add a plane and draw the entire plane down this entire road. But we are not doing that here. We are definitely not doing that here. Here we could just add a mesh plane. Let's bring it down a bit. Then let's bring the plane down to where you think the ground is. And to figure this out, let's go to the solid view. Let's drag this plane down so it aligns with our tracking markers. So let's find a marker that is low, something like this one, and let's align the plane to it. So yeah, the plane is exactly at this marker's point. Yeah, so what we know now when we're looking at this footage is that this line right here is exactly on top of the bus. So we can drag it down so that this line will be exactly where the tire intersects with the floor. So here, yeah, then we can bring this forward now to represent the front of the bus. So this is the floor that is in front of the bus. We don't want it to intersect with the back. Let's bring it forward. You just want to catch the shadows of everything in front. Yeah. So this will also move and it will be pretty much attached to the floor. Let's extend this. Go into edit view, edge select, click on this and drag it on the y-axis forward. Yeah, so our floor is technically tracked to the scene, even though that is not what we are doing. We are doing more like attaching the floor to the motion tracked object. Now that we have this, let's go into the rendered view and see. We want to see our shadows. Yeah, you see, this is now catching our shadows. Let's move it forward a bit. Now it's catching our shadows, and we want to make this a shadow catcher, but we don't want it to be white. So we can either add a road texture, but that will not be wise, because since our object itself is moving down the road, you can see the texture of the road is also changing. So we need to do something very similar to what we did with this cube right here. So let's go to the shading tab. So what we need to do is to add the same material we used for this cube, material 01. Let's add it here. So in the camera view, we should be able to see the floor. When we play, just ignore all these parts. All these parts here, they are outside the camera view. That is why they are repeating. And everything inside the camera is aligning with the actual road inside the camera. So let's click on this 2 here to make a duplicate of our material. So this one is different. We can call this road. We'll call the other one bus. So for this road one, we want to adjust it. See, you can see it doesn't match with our current lighting. It doesn't match with the road. So we could add a node in between. We could either use an RGB curve or we could use a brightness contrast. Let's use brightness contrast. Add it in between our image and our shader. So let's increase the brightness. Make sure you're holding shift. Increase the brightness just a bit so it matches what we have in the background. Yeah. I think this is a little bit better. Yeah, this is a little bit better. It doesn't need to look exactly alike, but it needs to be close at least. Let's increase the contrast a bit. Yeah, I think I like this. So let's also make this a shadow catcher. You can see, let's go back to the layout. You can see we have our shadow on top of this. This is reflective. We do not want it to be reflective. Oh, it's because we copied the material from the other object. The bus is kind of reflective. So let's come here to the material and increase the roughness. We don't want this to be reflective. This is the floor. This is the ground. We don't want it to be metallic either. Let's bring this down. Yeah. So let's go back here and readjust this. Now it's looking too bright. Let's reset this. Click on the brightness contrast and hit backspace. So it resets everything. Cool. So we didn't even need to adjust the brightness. What we can adjust here is some of the colors. So Shift A, let's add a hue saturation value. Let's connect color to color, color to base color. Now we could mess with things like the saturation. We could make this less saturated. We could mess with the value so it is not as bright as this. We are just trying to match it with the background as much as possible. Let's mess with the saturation a bit. I think this matches a lot better now. Yeah, I think this matches a lot better now. So let's go back to our layout tab. Now we have our road that is catching the shadows. You can see our shadows on it. If I make this clock bigger, you should see a huge shadow on the floor. Yeah, that shows that the road is catching the shadow. Something else we should do, we should absolutely level up the realism of this entire thing, because we have 2 giant light sources here. Let's also add in lights. So Shift A, light, area light. Reduce it till it's small, RX -90, so it's facing the correct direction. And we could bring it exactly to line up here with this clock. So right here. And then we want to align it with the light. So bring it left, bring it up, bring it here, bring it down, scale it on the Z-axis, scale it on the X-axis, so it aligns. And Shift D, X, and bring it here. So we have two actual light sources that should affect our CG object. That is very important when you are trying to match your CG to your background footage. If there is any light source that you had in real life, try as much as possible to replicate it, especially really strong direct practical light sources like this. They really elevate the look of your CG. So let's go into the rendered view and see what that looks like. Now you can see this is crazy bright. Let's click on the light and reduce it. Let's try 1. Okay, let's see what 1 looks like here. 1. It's not too bright, but it's still looking brighter than what the background was. So let's try something even less. Let's drag this down to like, yeah, 320. I like 320. 320 milliwatts. Yeah, I think this is more accurate. Yeah, the lighting before was affecting the floor. You can see it was making the floor too bright. That was not happening in our real footage. So this is just accurate. You can see the difference. If I turn off the lights, you can see the side of the object doesn't have any reflection. So this light is not affecting this object at all. But when I turn on the lights, you can see it looks like the bus's light is affecting the clock. So let's go to our camera and increase our perspective in our viewport display so we can focus on just the scene. Yeah, for some reason this still doesn't look right. Oh, our cube is not visible. Let's click on the cube. Yeah, let's bring our clock over here, select all, delete it. Let's make our cube visible so we can see it. Go to solid view. Now let's add another cube and just bring it right in front of this other one. This is what I did, you know, depending on how much time you have, you could model an entire contraption using like metal rods, however it would be to attach something to the front of the bus, whatever material, whatever modeling you want to use, you could do that. I'm just going to add a simple cube, a wooden plank, just as an example. So let's stretch this on the x-axis till it's wider than the bus behind. Yeah, so this should be stuck to the front of the bus now. Yeah, so what I basically did was to add the object on top of this cube. But before we do that, let's apply the scale and then add a material for the cube, a wooden texture. Yeah, funny enough, Polyhaven also has textures. You could find, do they have wood? Yeah, wooden textures. Yeah, there are a bunch of wooden textures here. You could use whichever one makes sense to you. Let's try this one. 1 planks. Download. Let's extract this, extract all, and you would see the textures in here. Yeah, so let's go back to Blender, add a new material to the wood, click on the Principal BSDF, Ctrl+Shift+T, then go find your 1 planks textures, select everything and import it. Now we should have this wood texture in here. Yeah, it looks alright to me. You can also go into edit mode, U, cube project, and then rotate on the z-axis by 90 degrees. Yeah, so it looks like we have a bunch of planks. Let's go back to layouts, go into our rendered view and see how that looks. Okay, our cube is currently covering our lights. We don't want that, so let's bring the wood down so it's not covering the lights. Yeah, so let's see what that looks like. Yeah, the wood is attached. Cool, now we could add the CCTV camera that I used in my example. Let's go back here to Polyhaven and then under models, let's search for camera. Yeah, we have 2 CCTV options here. I think this was the one I used. Let's click on it and download. Now open the blend file, the security camera blend file, and you should see your 3D model in here. And this is already rigged. That is the cool thing, it's already well rigged. So in pose mode, we can select this and move it around and to affect the camera, which is really great. We don't have to really stress when it comes to the animation. So let's just select everything, copy, and paste it in our blend file. We have our camera here. I don't know why this thing keeps happening where we have multiple versions of the rig. This one controls the camera, this other one doesn't control anything, so let's delete it. This one doesn't control anything, so let's delete it. So this controls the camera. Cool. Let's bring it forward and just align it to the front of the bus. Shouldn't be that big. Yeah. So align it to the front of the plank actually. So just attach it right in front of it. Let's bring it down. Yeah, right in the middle of it. So this was basically used. I think I also added nails. I found a nail 3D model and nailed this plank so it's not just hanging there. Yeah, I found this model from CG Trader. Just take one of the nails and you could paste it in scene. It's way over here. Shift S, selection to cursor. Now you could scale this down, RX 90. Let's bring it forward, bring it down, and just try to align it here. So a very giant nail. So depending on how much you want to spend, how much time you want to spend modeling, you could really fine tune this entire thing to be a proper metallic contraption, like some scaffolding that you put on top of the car. But this is just me using this as an example. Shift DX. Now let's take a look at that in our rendered view. Yeah, that looks cool. That looks really cool. Can already see the camera in the scene. Now the cool thing here is because we added this light, this area lights, whenever this object rotates, it's going to catch the light. Why are we not seeing the reflection of our area light on this object? Okay, I think the light is inside of our cube. Let's bring it out. Yeah, so it's in front. It should not be inside. Let's bring it out. Yeah. Now let's see what that looks like. Perfect. Yeah, this is what we were missing. We weren't seeing the reflection of this light on top of our wood and on top of our security camera here. Now, yeah, this is looking a lot better. Having the reflection from the light really sends the message that this CG object just might be there. Now let's just add a little bit of animation to this CCTV so it looks like it's looking around. And to do that, you could just go into pose mode. So we have talked about object mode and edit mode in this course. Now there's something called pose mode when you are animating bones in characters or bones used for rigging objects like this. You could use pose mode to add your animation. So if I rotate this circle here, this empty, is rotating the entire thing because we are not in pose mode. But if I go to pose mode by clicking here and coming to pose mode or hitting Ctrl Tab, now when I select this and I rotate it or I move it around, we are now affecting just the camera. So let's just play with that. At frame 1, make sure you're in pose mode, not object mode. So at frame 1, let's use our G to bring this over here. Hit N to pop this out, then right click location and insert keyframes. Then somewhere around 50 or anywhere around, just move this around again using G. Hit I to add new keyframe, move it around again. Let's make it face here. I to add new keyframe. Let's move this. Make sure it's not intersecting with the back. Be careful about that. Let's bring this here. Let it face down. So this is just peculiar to this animation that I'm doing. You don't have to add any animation to it. You could just add your objects there and that could be the video. But I just want to make it more dynamic. So let's just add keyframes around so this camera will be looking around. Yeah. So let's just make sure we are not intersecting with the back here. Yeah, so let's see what that looks like. We already have the animation. So let's Ctrl Tab to come out of pose mode. So we are back in object mode. In pose mode, you can't select any other objects here. So if you're wondering why you can't select anything, just make sure you're in object mode so you can select stuff. So yeah, we already have this cool looking animation. And this is the coolest part, the fact that we are catching this light, this practical lights that we have added into our scene that now looks like it's light coming from our bus. It really ups the realism of it all. And also one final thing, make sure we don't want to see this plane. We don't want to actually see it, because I was wondering why there is a huge line on top of our wheels. We don't want to see this plane. It's serving as just a shadow catcher. So come to object and select shadow catcher. So the plane and the cube here, this boss geometry, they are both shadow catchers. They are not actual geometry we want to see in the scene. So as you can see your camera shadows on the floor. So when we are moving around, when you render this out, we would have all the shadows on the floor. We would have the reflection of this light coming from this boss on top of the camera. And it's very this light reflection thing is super key to the realism of this video, because if I turn off these two area lights, even though this might look nice to a lot of people, but this just looks wrong. There is two huge beams of lights behind. It should reflect, it should affect the CG object. So when I turn it on, it looks a lot more realistic. So you could mess with this and make it yours. For example, instead of having just a simple plank here, you could construct something. You could add a loop cut like this and select this face and extrude it, and then place something in front of it. That could be your concept. You could really mess with this. Yeah, you could mess with this however you please, and you don't have to use this exact footage. You could try this with some other video, probably a car. I tried this with some other footage. I selected the car like I did before and then tracked it forward and backward, and now I can add my cube on top of the car. So you could try this with different footage to see how much you can track an actual object that is moving in the footage. But yeah guys, there you have it. That is how I created this, and this is how you approach motion tracking. There are a lot of ways to do this. This is just the process I usually use when I'm tracking actual objects. Now we started with a plain footage of just a boss. Now we have this plank nailed to the boss, and we also have the camera. So I want you guys to take this and spend more time on it, spend more time developing around it, and you could use a different footage. So learning all these skills basically just makes you flexible. So when you have an idea, you're not limited by your skill set. There's sometimes you might have an idea where you want a CG object to follow an actual vehicle or something in your scene, and you might not know how to approach it. This is how you approach it. It's good to have all the skills, so whenever you need them, you can just call upon them. So if you have any issues trying to execute this and follow this lesson, just let us know in the community. We can tackle it together, and I'll see you in the next lesson.